I have a friend named Mel. Not sure if she listens to the podcast, but shout out to Mel if she does. A few years ago, she decided to commit to running for a 4-year cycle to see how good she could get. 4-year cycle just because that's an Olympic cycle. One of the things she did was go to altitude for the first time. When she went, I remember her saying that her coach had her mostly running easy volume because it was her first time at altitude. In subsequent trips to altitude, she did her usual training, which includes intervals and tempo runs. I always wondered why the first time at altitude would be different. Well, maybe our guests today will be able to tell us. Hi, and welcome to the Running Book Reviews podcast, where we review books written for runners, about runners, and by runners to help you decide if you would like to read the book for yourself. We also hope that listening to us chat about running can help keep you motivated about your own running, or maybe inspire you to try something new. My name is Liz, and with my co-host Alan, we're going to talk with authors Jen and Sim about their book, Smart Running, the ultimate guide to being a fitter, stronger, more confident runner.
Smart Running is a 19-chapter book divided into 6 parts. I'll just run through the 6 parts. Our bodies and systems, becoming a resilient runner, mental skills for runners, we all need a bit of that, races, challenges, and adventures, practicalities, hands-on stuff, and training plans and workouts, how to build your plan, basically. There's a very wide range of topics, and I think it'll appeal to both new and experienced runners. So there's a overall width of coverage and deep dives. Let's tell you a little bit about Jen and Sim Benson. Jen is a runner, writer, mum, and UESCA-certified running coach. She has a master's degree in sport and exercise medicine, specialising in distance running. Her PhD research explores psychology and physiology that underpins running performance. She's also a trained Mindful Sport Performance Enhancement teacher. Goodness me, she's got qualifications in everything. She's completed over 50 marathons and ultras, including 2 podium finishes at ultras in 2023, and a finish at the 2024 Arc of Attrition 100-miler, which if you're not from the UK and you don't know Arc of Attrition, that is an extremely tough race. If you finish, you're an absolute superhero. She's a fan of good books. Yay, Jen! And great coffee. Also, yay, Jen! Sim is a runner, writer, photographer, and dad. He's a qualified England athletics running coach with a background in orienteering, climbing, and mountaineering. He's explored the Alps, Iceland, and the Himalayas, both with the British Exploring Society and on self-guided adventures, and he's completed marathons, ultras, iron distance triathlons, and adventure races. Recent successes include finishing the North Coast 110-mile ultra marathon. I don't think he did any fishing there. And a win and a new coast record at the 2023 Limitless Trails Tinsel 12. But apparently he's not a fan of good books or great coffee. It doesn't say here anyway.
Maybe he just had to shorten his bio a little bit.
He had to shorten it down. He had to cut the coffee and the great books, I guess.
Yeah, just because he had too much other stuff going on.
Welcome, Jen and Sim.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Hey, babe.
So first question, how did you decide to write this book, and who did you have in mind? Like, who did you write it for?
Like we met through a kind of joint passion for outdoor sport and running in particular. And it's something that I've always run. I started out as a podiatrist, actually treating a lot of runners. So I started at the feet and I gradually worked my way up, and now I look more at what's going on in people's heads when they're running. So yeah, it's kind of been a lifelong passion for me. And when the opportunity came up to write a book about running, it was kind of, the brief was just, write everything about running.
Oh, wow.
And that was kind of an amazing opportunity, but also a little bit overwhelming. So it took a few years to write it, to work out what was going in it, what shouldn't be in it. But I think when we looked at the existing books, a lot of them were either psychology, or they were physiology, or they were how to look after your feet, or they were navigation. And we wanted to write a book that brought all this together, because especially as a trail runner, you've got to look at all of those things. You kind of need to have all the information on that broad spectrum of stuff, kit, footwear, everything. So our kind of brief and our aim was to make a book that had a little bit of everything at a level of detail that wasn't too deep, but was deep enough. And kind of covered a bit of everything, really. So
did you kind of go sort of this chapter for you and this chapter for Sim, or did you just lay it out as skeleton and then just both dive into all the pieces and add pieces to each chapter? How did you share the work?
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely got sort of slightly different interests and passions within the whole sort of subject of running, and therefore we sort of led the bits that we really wanted to lead, which sort of worked quite well. But we took quite a long time before we really started properly writing, just talking about it and trying to work out what was, like Jen was saying, what goes in, what doesn't go in, and how detailed in each bit. And then we both, like, all the way through, read each other's stuff and commented on it and asked other people, and just edited it until we were both happy with everything.
Yeah, I think for me, like, the science side of things and is what I love. And for Sim, he loves the navigation and the kit. So that worked quite well as well.
Yeah, because you need all of those things. In terms of the science of things, like, you do go into, I guess, in a few different chapters, you go into measuring, because we all have these smartwatches now, and they measure things, and they give us information. Sometimes it's not very good, though, because I just ran a 10K in 41 minutes something. And after the 10K, my Garmin was still telling me that my predicted 10K time is 44 minutes. Like, it's not even smart enough to realize that I just ran it faster. So do you think that we measure too many things? Do you think that we're too, like, that some people are just too reliant on what the watch tells them for?
Yeah, definitely. Like, we both use a sort of a running watch, and measure our runs and other sort of activities. But there's, like, the watches there are a few sort of metrics that they directly measure, like the distance you're going and the speed you're going. And then there are quite a few things that they basically extrapolate from that data. And the further you extrapolate away from what you've actually done, the less, like, it depends on the sort of specific program of the watch, what numbers you end up with. And therefore, like, they become less realistic sometimes. And you get things like that. And it's like, we were in the Alps a couple of years ago, and I think I remember getting back from, like, it was probably only a 20K run, but I'd done like 3,000 meters of ascent, and I felt like I'd worked really hard. And my Garmin my Sunte was saying, like, my training load's a bit lower than last week. Maybe you should do some more. I was like, I'm bust.
Yeah.
Yeah, we always have the joke about your Garmin telling you that you're unproductive.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
You're following a professional training program that you've gotten out of a book that tells you exactly when to rest and when to go, and 3/4 of the time you're unproductive. Or it tells you that you're peaking after you've done a race. Oh, duh, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think around racing, it's a real problem. We coach a few athletes, and that week before a race, you might be feeling the taper might be going really well, you might be feeling really good, and then you look at your watch and it tells you something different, and that can be really messy.
You're a slacker, and
losing fitness.
Losing fitness, exactly. Like, that's the worst thing that I could tell you. I mean, especially like, I guess for a more experienced runner that's kind of used to it telling us, like, all kinds of things that are not true, we can sort of put it aside and be like, well, it doesn't mean anything. But for someone that's, like, relatively new or just got a Garmin and now it's telling them that they're, like, not doing as well as they thought they were doing, it's
difficult. And I think things like sleep tracking, like, the evidence is very poor on the ability of a watch to track your sleep. And, you know, unless we actually look at brain waves, we can't really tell what stage, what kind of sleep someone's in. And then things like HRV, which is great if you measure it first thing in the morning and do it every day for a long time, so you can track your personal trends. But yeah, the ability of HRV to track anything while you're actually on the go doing activity is again very poor. And it's very hard to know which of these numbers is real, which is like an algorithm, and I think it's interesting that a lot of them also ask for your subjective assessment of how you're feeling. And actually we use RPE, the rate of perceived exertion, and that's really powerful. We're really good at knowing, you know, when you look at RPE compared to heart rate, you ask athletes to rate their perceived exertion. We're really good at knowing what heart rate we're at, even without having that data. So we don't really need this data. We look at it all the time because it keeps us interested, and you know, we're data-driven creatures, aren't we? But actually, I think a lot of it is telling us what we really already know, or even contradicting what we already know. You know, it's
I think the first like if it's just confirming what we already know, I think that makes us feel good. But sometimes if it contradicts what we already know, it makes us, instead of second guessing the watch, like we have a tendency to second guess like what we're feeling, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah. HRV, heart rate variability, is something that I've just sort of discovered and sort of taking a very slight interest in, because I ran Boston Marathon this year. I sort of faded a little bit towards the end, and I was telling one of my buddies that, you know, I managed the race well because there was heat, and I felt I was really fading towards the end, but I didn't bonk out, and I managed to finish quite well. That was kind of my summary thoughts. And he said, well, go on Strava and have a look at your heart rate graph, and it tells quite a story. And I'd never really done that. And I went and had a look at it, and it's sort of, instead of sort of going up onto a plateau and sort of staying at a high level, towards the end, it was just trying to take off the top of the graph. It was just going off into oblivion. And it was kind of no wonder you were feeling like you were basically maxing out, because your heart rate had gone completely out of control and wasn't coming back at all.
Yeah.
And then I went, ooh, that kind of fits with how I felt. And then I suddenly went from, oh, I don't look at any of that stuff, to, oh, that's telling me something kind of that corroborates, you know, how I was feeling. And then I saw the discussion on heart rate variability, which is kind of an underlying thing where, if I read it rightly, your heart rate's more variable when you're more relaxed and, I guess, ready to run. Is it a good thing to use, or should we just ignore it as non-professionals?
I think if you use a decent app, like there's HRV for training, which is designed by a researcher who puts out he's called Marco Altini, and puts out loads of good stuff. And I think if you use it, so that uses the camera on your phone, and you can measure your heart rate variability first thing in the morning. So it's not affected by activity levels. It measures first thing in the morning, and it asks you for a subjective assessment of how you're feeling as well. So heart rate variability is good if you can track it over a long period of time, so you know what's normal for you and what variations are normal or abnormal for you. So it's the gap between our heartbeats, and like lots of things, higher rate of variability shows flexibility in our system. So if we're super stressed all the time, there's very little variability, so very little difference between like the gaps between our heartbeats. So if we've got a high heart rate when we're training, and then we've got a stressful job, so our heart rate stays high. So all the time, our heart rate stays uniformly high. There's very little variability. And the same happens if we're ill. So if we're ill, we tend to get a higher heart rate. So heart rate variability can pick up if you're doing it every day and you know what's normal for you, it can pick up the early stages of coming down with something, and that can be helpful. And it can, if you wake up with a bit of sore throat, you're like, am I coming down with a virus, or is it just that I slept with my mouth open? It might help you decide whether to do that really intense session today or not. So I think in combination, it has the potential to be useful in combination with that subjective, how am I really feeling? It's quite interesting, and it's something that things like voluntary slow breathing techniques to reduce anxiety, say before a race, they're reflected in your heart rate variability as well. So it's kind of it's one of these biofeedback measures that is a useful indicator of our psychological stress levels as well as our physical readiness to train.
Mm-hmm.
I doubt I'm going to establish my baseline for heart rate variability, because you just said you have to take a measurement every day. Well, that excludes me immediately, because I'm useless at being
at doing something every day.
Disciplined at doing everything. It's taken me 5 years to be able to drink a protein shake at the end of every training. I don't think I'm going to be taking measurements with my phone every morning when I get up. I'm going to be reaching for the coffee pot probably, or something like that. You did mention something else that I got a question. Sorry to commandeer the questioning here for a while, Liz, but you talked about breathing. I've got it quite near the end of my list of questions, but I was fascinated by the use of breathing exercises, basically to help with your running, I think. Let me ask you guys the open-ended question. Can doing breathing exercises help with your running, and what should we do?
I think breathing exercises where they're most helpful is with anxiety. So with say pre-race anxiety, which a lot of people suffer with a lot. A lot of people get very, very nervous before a race, and that can be really it can really hinder people's progress if they get so nervous before a race. Not only can it make them not want to race, but it means you start out your race in a kind of heightened state and don't run at your best. So where breathing exercises and mindfulness-based techniques are really helpful is in that time before a race, where you just want to calm yourself down. And it's a technique where you can either go down the mindfulness route, where you're practicing mindfulness meditations every day, and that's probably the most effective way of bringing breathing into your training and being able to draw on that when you're getting nervous. But if you don't want to do that every day, which is a big commitment, and obviously there are apps and things that can then help with that, but simply doing voluntary slow breathing, which is so you count your breath, so you do 4 or 5 seconds on your in breath, and then longer than that on your out breath. So it's focusing on the out breath being longer than the in breath. And what this does is it stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system. So we've got a sympathetic nervous system, which is like our accelerator, the gas pedal, and
that's
a parasympathetic,
kind of your fight or flight system.
Exactly. Yeah. And then the parasympathetic nervous system, which is like the brake pedal. So a lot of the time, the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight, is really useful if we're in a situation where we need that response, lots of adrenaline, lots of anxiety, where that's useful. But before a race, that's not helpful. That's not an evolved response that we want. So by doing the voluntary slow breathing, we activate the parasympathetic nervous system, and that puts the brakes on the sympathetic nervous system. So that calms us down. It's very hard to do voluntary slow breathing and panic at the same time. It also distracts your brain. So you're thinking, you're counting, you're thinking about slow breathing. So it's really, really effective.
Does it reduce your glucose burn as well?
I have no idea. It could well do. Certainly cortisol, like the stress hormone, is involved. Like we release more glycogen when cortisol's about. So it could well do. Certainly all those things that happen when we're ready to fight or flight will be reduced. So yeah.
Let's say you're doing like a shorter race, because shorter races, I mean, you kind of need to have, I guess, a little bit of that fight or flight, because like if you're running a 1500 on the track, or if you're running a 5K, you need a little bit of that. But for sure, I mean, if it's so overwhelming that you never want to race because you're terrified on the starting line, that's not good either. But if you do voluntary slow breathing or one of these other techniques, can it potentially bring your level of stimulus too far down and then affect your performance negatively, do you think? Or do you think that there's just really no, like there's nothing to lose by doing this?
My feeling would be there's nothing to lose, because as soon as you stop the slow breathing, as soon as you actually line up and you're waiting for that gun to go, all that stuff will kick back off again very quickly.
Okay.
So I would think you want to delay that response for as long as you can, and then save it all for the start line, because all that adrenaline will kick back in, and once the gun goes off, it'll all be there. So I think I would say there's probably nothing to lose, and it's something that's, you know, many elite athletes use, and you see them, whether that's sprinters or basketball, like, you know, you see these top level athletes using these techniques to keep those nerves under control before a big performance or a big game.
Yeah, so I guess if they're using it, then it's definitely good for the rest of us.
Yeah, yeah, I think so.
Let's go back to sort of more the beginning of the book. You talk about nutrition, and I mean, nutrition is a big topic. You know, there are all kinds of thoughts about nutrition, but I guess in the chapter you specifically talk about metabolic rate and meeting energy demands, and so you talk about like being an energy deficiency and what that means and why it's not good. One of the things that I think a lot of people find difficult is knowing what our metabolic rate is and knowing how many calories we're consuming. So
yeah, I remember, Liz, you and I had a discussion a while ago about your marathon and whether you were actually fueling enough for your training programs.
yeah, because I had gone to see actually a registered dietitian with the training plan that I was following. And then she actually made me like an eating plan, because I don't have necessarily like the appetite to go with the training. Like sometimes, you know, our training increased from my baseline probably like 20 kilometers a week. You know, a lot of times I was actually feeling less hungry because we were doing a lot of those, they call them medium long runs. So we were following the Fitzinger plan from So you know, there were a lot of medium long runs, and like after long runs, I mean, I think it's pretty typical that people don't feel as hungry. And we were doing them in the evening. So basically, like it would be really easy for me to just skip supper and go to bed, because like then it's bedtime, at least for me, not for Alan. He stays up until like late hours. But yeah, so our running watches measure all kinds of things. How accurate are they, let's say, in terms of measuring our calorie expenditure? And then also, how easy is it to calorie count and make sure that you're getting that in?
Yeah, should I take this one as well?
Yeah.
Well, we're just asking all the Jen questions.
Oh,
at the
no.
moment?
I'm sure we'll get to the sim questions later.
I don't mind.
Yeah, certainly calories are a minefield. So like a lot of the time the calorie values we read on packets don't represent the calories that we can extract from that food. So you know, especially things that are like high fiber, like yes, they might have a certain calorie value when they're put in a bomb calorimeter and tested in a lab, but because of the way we digest them, they've got indigestible parts to them. The calories we extract from them don't match up with the energy values that are on the packet. And conversely, with ultra processed foods, they come in a highly digestible, highly absorbable way. So we probably get everything from those that's advertised. So, you know, even just looking at calories, that's very difficult. The way that that metabolic rate is calculated is difficult. So the gold standard is the doubly labeled water technique, and that's very expensive and very invasive and not something we can all do. So there are various equations that we can use to work out our metabolic rate, and therefore with various other equations, what so we can have a vague idea of what our calorie expenditure might be on a sedentary day, and then add in our activity energy requirements on top of that. But it's never going to be accurate. The calories that we count are never going to be accurate. So I think what you said you did, like for a lot of people, going on hunger is the best way and the easiest way. And certainly if you go to bed hungry or you wake up in the night hungry, that's a really strong sign that you're not getting enough energy in. But for you, if you know that your hunger signals aren't always there, then going to a dietitian is, a registered dietitian, someone who really knows what they're on about, would be our first advice. And we work alongside dietitians with our coaching clients. So if there's ever that kind of issue, then we can refer to a dietitian and someone who really is an expert in that area, because things like relative energy deficiency in sport, which is where, so our bodies need to be in to have sufficient energy to do both our basic metabolic functions. So that's everything from repairing, training damage, keeping our endocrine systems going, growth, all those things. We need to have enough energy to do all that stuff, plus enough energy to do all our activities. So that's our training, that's the dog walking, all those things on top of that. And if we're not taking enough energy in, our bodies will prioritize activity. They'll prioritize fueling activity and downregulate the other stuff. So we'll end up, especially for women, if we don't have enough energy, and particularly we don't have enough carbohydrate-based energy, research has shown we downregulate our bone metabolism.
Which is very bad.
Which is very bad.
Yes.
Yeah. So we switch off bone metabolism, we switch off reproductive functions, and all those things are very bad for our health. And while running might improve short term, is very bad long term for our running. So very counterproductive and a really important thing to keep an eye on. So we always say, especially with women, if you lose your period, if you're hungry at night, obsessively thinking about food, all these things are strong indicators that you're not getting enough energy in. And it goes with low mood as well, and lack of motivation for training. And those things apply to guys as well. Yeah, guys can get reds, and often it's not intentional. So sometimes there's intentional trying to lose weight to get faster. But often, especially with people who perhaps recently upped their training, it's unintentional. We don't realize we're not getting enough energy in. So those are things we advise looking out for. And again, as you did, going to see a dietitian if you've got any of those symptoms, or you're not sure.
So actually, I think we should mention like the most important thing. If you're training really hard and you're not improving, like that could also be a sign. And yeah, like that was my biggest motivator to go and see someone, was because I would just, well, first of all, some of the trainings I was not able to do, like say things like long lactate thresholds. So I was like sort of intolerant of those. Like I could usually I could sort of, grit down and get a 5K pace track interval session done, but I stopped being able to do like tempo runs effectively. So those are kind of the things that I saw. And, as runners, like we always want to run better. And Alan and I have this sub 3 hour marathon goal, or at least I do, because Alan's run it already. So, but yeah, so for me, not adapting to my training is like the biggest motivator. So, anyway, just thought I'd mention that one.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
why
really important.
that's kind of why your training partner becomes unhelpful, because we're used to maybe running together and I'm running along, and then you feel maybe you need to try to keep up, and you've got something in the background that's probably not enabling you to do that sometimes, and
yeah,
then you try to keep up, then you're making the whole thing worse.
Yeah, but it's like your overall running is like your actual training, but it's also like your recovery and your sleep, and it's your nutrition and it's your food, and like all three of those are effectively like almost as important as each other. So like even if you're running a lot and doing all the sessions, if you're not fueling them, or if you're not resting and recovering from them, you're never going to be able to really improve as much as you can. So you need to make sure you look after all three of those sort of sessions effectively.
Yeah.
And also, as on top of energy requirements, there's the nutrient requirements. So around half of female endurance athletes are iron deficient. And that's another thing that will make you feel like that you're not recovering properly and that you're not training to the level you want to, and you're not improving, tired and things. There's things like low iron levels, and that's really prevalent in endurance athletes. So the food you take in, it needs to meet your energy requirements, but also your nutrient requirements as well. So there's those two parts to the equation as well.
Probably that segues us into, from food, that segues us into hydration. Okay, hydration, yeah, drink the water, guys, and that's kind of a natural thing. I'll spin the question to an experience we had last week. We had one of our friends who's a track athlete do his first marathon ever, which was kind of, it became like one of those movies, you know, where the car crashes and all the people in the car are going to get really treated badly in the car, and it's smashing into or going off a cliff, and you know horrible things are happening, but you can't look away. His marathon sort of what do you
That's how
think,
it
Liz?
went.
That's kind of how it went. Yeah. It was going great until I went off the cliff, and now one of the things he said to us, he's now actually fully recovered from his marathon
Good.
and looking for his next marathon, which is a pretty brave thing to do.
No, actually,
after
he
his
signed up for his
experience.
next marathon before he did his first one, and that is probably the only reason why he's going to do
Okay,
another one.
maybe that
Yeah.
explains it. One of the things he said to us, though, shout out to Camilla if you're listening, Camilla. One of the things he said to us was he got these massive cramps in his legs.
And his hamstrings.
Yeah, and his hamstrings towards the end. I can see you both nodding sagely because you go, yes, this happens quite a bit. I mean, I've had it myself in the past. He got to the point where he had to throw himself on the ground and basically then
On someone's lawn.
spend on somebody's lawn, spend minutes trying to stretch his hamstrings out and then hobble the rest of the distance. And then he said to us, Alan, Liz, how do I fix this? And we said, well, that depends. I don't know about Liz, but I didn't really have a standard response, whether it was an electrolyte imbalance or lack of hydration or lack of training or so.
Yeah, but he had gone online, and so he researched it. And so the two things that he kind of came up with was electrolytes and that he wasn't running enough fast 200s on the track, which I guess that's more like strength. But yeah, can electrolytes fix this issue, or is it probably something else?
It is probably lack of training, specific training. So I think we used to think that that cramp was very much to do with electrolytes.
Mhm.
And it's the case that for a few people, it probably doesn't help if your electrolyte balance is out. But for the vast majority of people, it's simply working the muscle harder than the muscle has been trained to work. And that seems to be like cramp is a multifactorial issue, and we get cramps for all sorts of reasons. But with exercise-induced cramps, it tends to be that we're doing something either for longer, or perhaps we're doing. I got cramps in a mountain race recently, and I don't live in a mountainous place. And I trained hard, but I hadn't trained on mountainous terrain. So I was just taking my muscles through, I was expecting them to produce more power than normal, taking them through different ranges of motion. And unsurprisingly, they rewarded me with with cramp. So normally it's just overworking the muscles. But saying that electrolytes are important, probably not for a marathon. Probably not until we're running for a bit further than that. Like, we know hydration is important, but the best marathon runners finish the most hydrated often. So the elite marathon runners often finish fairly dehydrated. So dehydration does impact performance negatively, but we can cope with a certain level of that. And actually overhydration is much more dangerous generally for runners. So slower marathon runners drinking a lot of at every aid station are much more likely to get into trouble through over drinking and something called hyponatremia, which is where we dilute the sodium content in our bodies too much and can be fatal. So that's much more of an issue usually than dehydration, especially in shorter races. When we're looking at ultra marathons where we're running for more than 6 or 7 hours, that's when we need to make sure we are replacing lost salts, electrolytes, and balancing those out with water, and that stops stomach issues, that stops all sorts of stuff happening. But electrolyte drinks might be more palatable, so sports drinks might be easier to drink than just plain water. But beyond that, there's not a huge amount that they're giving you, especially over a marathon or shorter distance, compared with any water or juice or anything like that. So yeah.
Okay, so basically there is something in the training that he needs to figure out more
quite
of.
possibly. If he's a track runner, like,
Yeah.
how about how many long runs have you done? It's like, if he's done lots of sets of 200 meters, he might have very strong legs, but if he hasn't regularly run sort of 18 miles or something, then
Yeah, what he was doing is certainly a regular set of marathon paced kind of 1 hour runs.
Yeah.
So maybe he needs to do slower and longer.
Yeah, I definitely find with marathon, for me, like, I need to have done several sort of 20-ish miler, or at about 18, 20 miles, it all just falls apart and I'll car crash. And it sort of doesn't seem to matter much how many sets of fast running and that sort of thing that I've done. I need to, like, the most important thing for me is to make sure I've done some 20 milers.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah,
He's going to find his way.
Yeah, you learn though, don't you?
The thing is also the goal time that he had set out to do, it wasn't a slow time either. I mean, he was setting out to run about a 3:10, 3:15. So yeah, it's I mean, at those paces, those are pretty significant paces. So yeah, I guess if you don't have, he did have the marathon pace training that he had, because he did quite a few of those, but I guess then if you don't have the volume, then you're still doing on race day, you're doing like a way, 3 times your volume of marathon pace.
Yeah, what we try and get, like, with the marathon runners we coach, so a half marathon, just to introduce that intensity over a longer period of time. So half marathon, maybe 6 weeks out, and then a 20 miler at marathon pace, maybe 3 or 4 weeks out. And then having done those longer runs at race pace or near to race pace, there is very specific training to race day. So when it comes to race day, if you've done a 20 miler at race pace, you can hold it for 20 miles, and then the race day excitement and atmosphere can carry you over those last 6 miles, hopefully.
Okay, so 20 miler at race pace. Ouch.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it really does,
No,
it really does help.
Yeah, I just,
that's what we need to do, Liz, huh?
I know, but I find it hard. Like, we were doing the Fitzinger plan, and yeah, when we got to past 19K at marathon pace in just a practice, it was it was like too much. Like usually I would fail those runs. So
Yeah, I think he
yeah.
went to 23K, 24K.
I think, yeah, it goes
we
to
deal in
23.
kilometers, so
Yeah. Which
um,
is how many, I don't know how many miles is that, like
yeah,
15 miles or
yeah,
something?
about 15
Yeah.
miles.
Yeah.
We were
Yeah.
finding that very tough.
Yeah, those were tough. I think we both failed that 23K
Yeah, we did.
one. It was like
And we failed our 3-hour attempt as well. So there you
that we
go.
did, yeah. So I guess, yeah, there might be something to that. So
Yeah, I think a 20-mile race and getting under 2.5 hours for a 20 miles, so that's like 30.
oh yeah, maybe if I do it in a race, I think
Yeah.
that's yeah, in a race setting that could be doable. It's because we were doing it in it's a
Yeah.
Saturday morning long run, and here we are. We got like 23K to do a marathon pace. Those were a failure. But I guess if you're racing, you have the whole, you're not carrying your own water, like you have the excitement of the race start
Yeah.
and the crowd and other people. So
Yeah.
maybe that
Yeah.
helps. I just
Yeah.
have a little question about something you mentioned in your book in the hydration section. So we were talking about drinks in this section, and you mentioned something called squash. To me, that's like a
Oh
vegetable.
yeah.
That's a vegetable, and I can't imagine drinking it. So what exactly
Yeah.
is squash?
It's cordial.
Yeah,
Cordial.
cordial.
And what's cordial?
Oh,
Oh.
like a syrup, like
Oh,
fruit
okay.
syrup type thing that you dilute.
Oh, okay. It's like a sugary thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
like a concentrated
Do you have
Imitation
sugar
juice.
drink. Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Like good to get that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. You end up with the contents, you dilute it with water and you end up with what you would find in a juice box.
Basically,
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Synthetic.
Yeah. That's what my parents used to get that in the frozen section of the grocery store. It was frozen, and you
Okay.
have to you put the can in the jug and you add like 3
Yeah.
cans of
In
water
the
or
UK, you
something.
get these syrupy bottles of stuff and you make a dilution to taste.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly that.
I used to
Okay.
always get beaten up by my parents because I used to put too much in and then I'd use
Yeah.
the whole bottle up before next week came around and it was time to buy another one.
Oh, let's talk about kids running, because you do talk about this in the book. We do hear some stories about, I think it was recently in Runner's World, or maybe it was online. There was like a Runner's World article online, but I think it was a 9-year-old that broke a half marathon record for his age group, like a world record. Is it okay for kids to run that much?
I think it's one of those it depends answers, isn't it? I think it's probably not the best advice, but there are bound to be kids who can get away with it, and there are 16-year-olds who run 100-milers and it doesn't seem to do them any harm, but we don't know what the long-term impact is when kids are growing fast, especially putting those stresses on their bodies when their bodies are trying to grow and all those joints are forming, and you can see the potential for problems long term. So it may be fine, but I would say kids are very good at telling you when they've had enough in general.
Mhm.
And there are certainly, I think we've put in the book some guidelines that the governing bodies follow around the kind of distances that kids should be running at different ages, and that's vaguely in line with developmental milestones. But yeah, kids should be running. They it's really good for them. It's
Yeah.
Mhm.
and
In
they
general, a
enjoy
bit
it.
shorter.
Yeah, but not certainly you shouldn't be kind of shouting at them to keep going if they really want to stop, probably.
I guess also maybe it has a bit to do with like, are they eating enough for their level of activity? Because if they need to grow, I guess they need to have a surplus of calories, and if they're running too much and eating not enough, then I guess
Yeah,
it's
you
the
could.
same.
Yeah, it would be very easy for a kid who's also growing and running a lot to just almost not be able to eat enough because which is the problem. And I guess the thing is you'd need some sort of scientific study where you saw kids who are running distances at young ages and then keep them in mind until they're like 40, 50 or something and see what's happened. And and that's very hard to do, obviously, and ethically. But do you it would be hard to see a kid who ran a fast half marathon at 9 and then see how they're doing at 40. And like if they're broken at 40, then maybe it wasn't a good idea, but they might be fine. And but to have any sort of volume in that study would be very hard. So you'd only really be looking at individual cases. So it's quite hard to answer.
Yeah.
So actually in the book you mentioned for the age category, of a 9-year-old, they recommend like 2K. I'm guessing that's just the race distance 2K, not like 2K per day for training. Because I feel like kids, they just run around all the time. Like 2K, I feel for a 9-year-old is just, probably, run to their friend's house and run back home and run around the park and
then
they're
sit around
exceeded.
playing computer games all the
Yeah,
time.
I don't know. I'm thinking of like me when I was a kid, like I didn't like being at home, so I was always outside. I don't know, I don't know how far I walked and ran, but I feel like 2K is not a very long distance. If let's say you have kids in any sport, because if you think about soccer, they're running around a field.
Yeah,
they must do more than that.
Yeah, and I guess that's another thing that's hard because like if they're very active anyway, and then they do run training and they do a 2K or a 5K or whatever run, like how much have they done through the rest of the day? Whereas adults are like maybe we have a bit more of an idea how much we've also done. Like we might have walked the dog and wandered around the house and done some gardening or been to the shops or something, but we probably haven't been sprinting around for the rest of the day. And then we've done our run session. But yeah, I mean, our kids are 9 and 12, and they'll happily do a sort of a 5K run with us. But sometimes during that run, we'll stop and get an ice cream or something.
I think that's the key thing, isn't it? Like
yeah.
actually, 2K run continuously for someone who's 9 is quite a long way.
Mm-hmm.
And they do run around all the time. And in a game of soccer, they'll be running, but then they'll stop. And
yeah,
that kind of, it's almost like interval training, isn't it? That they do all the time. And actually a 2K run, yeah, if we think of like on a track, 1,500 meters at school was really, really hard. So like having to do a 2K run in one go probably is maybe the upper limit of what you want to ask them to do. But yeah, it's a really good point. Their overall running distance over the course of a day is probably a lot more than that. But in one go, maybe like I don't know, do you have park run there?
we do.
Yeah, because we have junior park run.
Not much, but
yeah, I think that's 2K is junior park run. And that feels enough, I think, for most of the kids to do in one go. Otherwise they give up.
Liz and I have a training session on Thursdays usually, which is actually an ice cream run. So you talked about taking your kids for an ice cream.
Yeah,
we run
take
about
the
11K,
adults.
and sometime in the middle we pass an ice cream store and we all stop, and then we
Perfect.
take turns at buying the ice creams. It's the only reason people come.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Flipping the script from kids to old people, because I identify more with old people. I was pretty amazed to read your stats in the book about I think it was in the section around strength work and resistance training to support your running. Studies show that aerobic exercise, running in my case, plus strength work, so some getting in the gym, can reduce premature death events by 35 to 40%. That's massive. In scientific studies, if you get like significant difference on 5%, statistically significant, you go, oh, that's a win. 35 to 40% is bonkers.
Yeah,
it's absolutely crazy. I mean, I don't really have a question other than to say I was completely flabbergasted.
Yeah, and I guess if you think of like your aerobic fitness is one thing, but if you keep your muscle strength good, then that's supporting your bones, that's supporting your balance. Like all these things, a lot of older people fall over and break things, and it's not a result of lack of fitness, but a result of lack of protection of the bones, lack of balance, stability, that kind of thing. So I guess when you look at the not directly, but the indirect results of being strong and fit into later life, it has multiple protective factors. So I guess that's why that percentage is pretty crazy.
I think also we've been hearing lately a lot about the importance of heavy strength training for runners. Because that's what we follow. We follow the runners. So like, I guess it might just be in life also, but specifically for runners. But I guess there's a lot of people that find it hard to get to a gym, especially, if you're focused on running, you're doing all this training already, and to have to like go to a gym to do strength training, it just sometimes doesn't fit in the schedule. So can runners get benefits from other types of strength training as well?
Definitely. And the evidence is really good for explosive strength training with runners. So even if we're lifting heavy, we should be focusing on that explosive phase of the lift and using body weight and gravity. It's amazing how much you can end up lifting, effectively lifting, and being very specific to running as well. So in the book, the weight training section is designed for people who don't get to go to a gym, who don't have maybe loads of home weights, just a couple of home weights. And we've designed those to be very running specific and to utilize body weight and gravity. So lots of dynamic stuff, plyometrics, like weighted squat jumps are one of my favorite things. So you hold a weight and do really good squat jumps, focusing on the explosive airborne bit, and then also really controlling the landing. So that's eccentrically loading our quads, which is exactly how we use them in running, especially off-road downhill running. So just something as basic as a squat jump, making it running specific. I think the amount of force you end up producing with a weighted squat jump, if you get some height on it, is huge and equivalent to quite a lot of weight if you were doing that more statically. So I think with a bit of thought, you can really work around not having gym access and still get really good results from more plyometric strength training. Very
good then. Because we're talking about strength training, let's move on to injuries, because they kind of go together. Most runners, they start strength training because they got injured. And so I feel like those two topics go together. But I actually specifically want to talk about, Jen, your experience. And sorry, Sim, it seems like we're not asking you any questions. But Jen, you talk about your experience with plantar fasciitis. And this really resonated with me because I had plantar fasciitis for like over 2 years. And I tried all kinds of things and it finally went away. I was doing, I can't remember. I think I was doing heel raise exercises or heel drop exercises or something. It finally went away. But there was something interesting in your story because you said that you ended up wearing firm shoes and that was helpful. But the popular thing that you always hear for people that have plantar fasciitis is like, go buy yourself a soft pair of shoes. And I remember I kind of had the experience where like I bought these cushioned shoes and like I couldn't wear them. They made my heel hurt more. And then I would wear like the Saucony Convaras, which were pretty firm, like not all that much shoe to it, not all that much structure or anything. And it felt like I could run a little longer pain-free when I wore that. Have we been getting the wrong advice about this soft shoe for plantar fasciitis?
Quite possibly. I mean, I think from a research point of view, the things that work are like stretching the bottom of the foot, like manually stretching it, and massage, that kind of thing, and also foot strengthening exercises, because in those with plantar fasciitis, foot muscles are weak. With the approach to treating, plantar fasciitis, you need to do two things. One is to almost splint the foot to stabilize the foot enough to take that traction off where the plantar fascia inserts onto the heel bone to allow it to heal. And at the same time, you need to be doing exercises to stimulate blood flow and to strengthen those intrinsic foot muscles. And I think maybe those two things have got a bit confused. So I think with a stiff shoe and something called low dye taping, which is amazing, which is where you basically tape up your whole foot. And it really, really supports you, and you can customize it and add a bit of extra tape and really support the foot. And that's really, really effective. And if you do the taping and then put your foot in a stiff shoe, quite often you can walk around pain-free. And that's amazing when you've got plantar fasciitis.
It is,
But
yeah.
if you just do that, you're probably not going to fix the problem, because you're not fixing the underlying biomechanical issue that caused the plantar fasciitis in the first place. So that's your kind of resting. And then when you're not walking around, you should be doing the exercises. So the massage and the foot strengthening exercises, which will stimulate healing and stop that happening again. So I think it's those, with plantar fasciitis, it's those two things you need to be doing, but you need to separate them out rather than wearing a soft shoe to try and do both, I think.
It's also catching it early seems to work. Like, if as soon as you start to get that pain, if you use some tape, like do the low dye taping method and protect it, then you can stop it developing into the sort of the full long-term problem that some people end up with. So it's worth getting it at the sort of first niggle. Don't ignore it.
I think your book was the first instance where I saw a reference to low dye taping. I thought, what's low dye taping? It's like use tape that's not very colored. But I gather that means it's kind of tipping around the foot and not sort of over the ankle and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think it's named after the guy who invented it.
Okay.
But it's a low, right? So you
Yeah.
can do a higher version, but it's the low one.
And you guys forgot to add the most important thing about plantar fasciitis treatment, which is do all of that for 18 months.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
and then it just goes away.
Yeah.
Yeah, by magic.
Yeah.
I think you actually put that in your book, that one doctor said it will go away on its own after 18 to 24 months, and you will attribute it to whatever it was that you were treating, however you were treating it at the time, as the magic solution.
Yeah.
It's kind of tough. I guess any tendon type injuries are tough because they have low blood flow and take a long time to get treated.
Yeah, and it's so frustrating having any injury when you're a runner, isn't it? It's like your whole life is, I want to get out and go for a run, and if something stops that, it's horrible.
We're currently in a hot weather spell here, and we were on the track last night, Liz and I, and suffering a little bit in the heat because we're not really acclimatized to it yet here in Montreal. It comes late and is often quite vicious. So we're pretty interested to read your discussion about heat and the fact that taking hot baths can actually help you to acclimatize better to the heat than actually quicker or better than being in heat.
Yeah.
That was kind of fascinating. How does that work? It's typical of the English to discover hot baths.
Yeah.
The problem with training in the heat, if you're not yet acclimatized to the heat, is that it reduces the quality of your training because it's uncomfortable, as you were finding. And so if you go straight out to race somewhere hot, and you're not acclimatized, you haven't, your body hasn't adapted to the extra heat, that's increased sweat rate, all those things that happen as you adapt to heat. We know it's a huge problem and a reason for a lot of people dropping out of hot races. When you're acclimatizing, you can either do active acclimatization or passive acclimatization. So active acclimatization is wearing loads of clothes, maybe doing your workout in a sauna or on a treadmill with heaters blowing and stuff. And that is effective, but it means you can't train as hard. So you have to reduce your training intensity, reduces your training quality. It also makes overreaching in your training more likely because your whole body is just working harder to try and cope with that heat. So actually, if you do your normal training and then you jump into a bath afterwards, you get the same heat acclimatization processes happening, but without negatively impacting your training quality, which is what I really liked. And it's also, most people have a bath. It's not like you've got to find a sauna or like heat your home to ridiculous temperatures. So it's just a really easy but effective way of stimulating those heat adaptations.
Yeah, it's a nice
And
example of a training hack that doesn't need you to spend a hell of a lot of money on some sort of gadget or
Yeah,
or treatment or something like that.
and one I don't think I've seen before.
I mean, like I follow a few athletes on Instagram, and one of them is a triathlete, and she actually has like installed a sauna in her backyard because what she does is like after a training, she hops into the sauna for, I don't know, 15, 30 minutes, something like that. And it seems like recently I've heard a few stories of pros that do that, but is the bath better, or would it be like kind of equivalent, but you don't need to have a sauna installed? Like is yeah.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, they'll do very similar things. But yeah,
Okay.
most people don't have the luxury of a sauna at home.
Yeah, I don't have a sauna at home.
But yeah, if you run to a gym or you have somewhere like mobile saunas are becoming really popular here. If you can get to a sauna and you prefer to do that, then it will be as effective. But yeah, the bath's just easy and you're gonna have a wash anyway. So
So it's a 2 for 1.
exactly,
Yeah.
Let's touch on the mental chapters that you have in the book. I always find it cool because I always figure that it's less exhausting to try to develop mental habits, and it's something that we don't really consciously work on a lot, and maybe an area where people can develop their running performance. I guess generally my question would be, what should we do to help ourselves if we're not doing anything? I noticed that you talk about habit forming laws from the Atomic Habits book, which has been quite popular. Is that what you should be doing, trying to develop good mental habits? Basically, open-ended question. Tell us about mental training.
yeah, I think with the habits, that's probably more useful if you're a new runner because before you fall in love with running, it's really hard work, and establishing a running habit is a good gateway into becoming a runner when you're not yet quite feeling like a runner, perhaps. So I think that's where habits are most useful. But also habit stacking. So after you've cleaned your teeth, which you do every day, doing your strength and mobility work. So it's very easy to forget to do strength and mobility work, or forget to do, even just standing on one foot to improve your foot strength and your balance is really helpful. But making that a habit, so every time you clean your teeth or every time you're doing, do something that you do every day to make sure you do the other thing as well. And then it's kind of an easy win, really. But especially core work and stuff like that, it's very easy to forget, but it's so helpful for loads of aspects of running. So yeah, I think that's where habits are helpful, habit stacking, or just making sure you create that habit. And I think in Atomic Habits, one of the things I really liked was making it easy and making it obvious. So there's nothing worse when you're getting back into running or getting into running in the first place when you can't find your shoes, you can't find your kit, you can't find keys. And that just makes the whole effort of getting through the door much harder. Whereas if everything's easy and obvious, your shoes are there and you're all ready to go, it's much easier to then get out the door and takes much less time. So I think just introducing things like that just makes it easier, doesn't it? From a habit point of view.
And because you guys are both coaches, are there any habits that are like the most popular ones that you're always trying to instill in your runners?
I think core work, probably.
Yeah,
Okay.
strength conditioning for work is because a lot of if you're getting a coach or if you're a runner, you probably already run. So, but yeah, it's like there is a lot of benefit from injury prevention and just like quality of your running to have some sort of core exercises and a bit of strength.
And most people do their exercises when they're injured.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
then they drop them when they're not injured, and then surprisingly the injury comes back or they get a different injury.
Yeah.
Alan's pointing to himself.
I definitely found like for the first I'm 40 now, and sort of up to like maybe a few years ago I could just do everything and it was fine, and I didn't bother doing any specific strength or anything, and I felt pretty indestructible. And then I'm starting to feel like if I don't do my strength and my core and stuff like that, I definitely feel like I get niggles or I get injuries, or I like think I don't recover from races as quickly as I used to. But if I maintain the sort of the strength and the core work and stuff, I definitely feel more like I was 10 years ago. So that feels like it's worth it.
Yeah. In terms of habit stacking, I guess there's all sorts of things you can read about, and you go, okay, I'm not doing that, I should do that. I'm not doing that, I should do that. Here's some exercises, I should do those. Here's some diet, I should do that. Oh, sleep. Oh, I must get to sleep on time. And you can have a whole bunch of things that you're trying to work on, and that's kind of cool. And I have the bandwidth for that, so I'm sort of looking at lots of things all at once. But what I do from a habit point of view is I'll make one of them non-negotiable. So for 3 months, every time I go out for a run, I'll concentrate on a tall posture because I'm old and I'm starting to curve, and I want my system to flex as best possible. So I'll just go, okay, that's non-negotiable. I have to get taller. And every time I go out running, I have to run through the mantra of posture and pulling the string on my head. And if I don't drink the protein drink every time, that's okay. But one thing is non-negotiable and I have to make it stick. And then after a while, you find, okay, I'm just doing that now. And you can go, okay, that doesn't count anymore. What's the next thing that I need to make stick? And that way you don't, I'll stand on one leg every time I brush my teeth, or whatever it is, and then you sort of build them in. They become just what you do, and then you can it's eating the elephant, I think.
Yeah.
One small bite at a time. Otherwise, you get overwhelmed.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and it's become an ingrained habit when you feel weird if you don't do it.
Yes.
Don't you? So, yeah.
Yeah, like when I forget my protein and then Alan's drinking his protein in front of me after the workout, and then I feel guilty. And then next time I don't forget the protein. So also on the topic of, I guess, mental strategies, can you explain if-then analysis and how it can be helpful for runners?
We were talking about this last night.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is it's called an implementation intention approach. So you're saying, and I think it probably works. I found it falls down a bit with ultras, because with ultras there are so many things that can go wrong. So trying to have a list of, if this happens, then I'll do this. You have to think of so many possible problems that come up that it gets difficult. But it's a useful thing. So if you're say running I'm going to go for ultras because it's what I'm doing at the moment. So a very simple one: if my mood feels low, then I will eat some food. So very simple, because if I'm running along and I'm feeling really down and I'm like, I don't think I can do this, and it's very easy to go down that spiral of, it's because I'm rubbish and I need to drop out.
Yeah.
Whereas if I've pre-prepared this if-then scenario, okay, if I'm feeling low in my mood, then I'll eat some food, and I don't even have to think about it, and I've got that pre-prepared. So I'm feeling a bit low, eat some food, and it almost always works. Or if my shoelace is too tight, if I didn't do anything about that, I know that it'll end up putting pressure on the top of my foot, then I'll get tendonitis and I'll probably have to drop out of my race. So before the race starts, I can go, if my shoe feels uncomfortable, if anything in my shoe feels uncomfortable, then I will take the time to stop and sort it out before it becomes a problem. And actually, I was talking to a sports psychologist and saying that often towards the latter stages of an ultra marathon, I'm very much like toys are going out of the pram. I don't want psychological strategies. I just want it all to be over. And she said at that point, you can go, like, if either something unexpected comes up or if I just want to drop out, then I'm going to stop. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to eat and drink and take a moment before I make any rash decisions, because it's those in the moment decisions that we then regret. So she said, even if you can't be specific, if something comes up and you feel like you're going to drop out, this is going to lead to bad stuff happening, then sit down, eat and drink, take a moment before you make any decisions. And I thought that was really good, actually. You know, it's becomes very chaotic towards the end of an ultra marathon, and to a certain extent later on in a marathon as well. So I think having those, just thinking through a few possible things that might come up, especially if you're an experienced runner and you know the things that have gone wrong before, then like if I'm feeling sick and can't take on nutrition, then I need to slow down, you know, just little things like that. And when you're really, really tired and really stressed, it just helps not to have to overthink things. It stops you going into that negative spiral, and kind of keeps things simple, which is how you need them. So that can be a really helpful one, I think.
It's interesting how they're different for different like distances in running and things, because like with the shoelace thing, if you're on an ultra, if your shoe's uncomfortable, stop and sort it. If you're running a 400 meters, if your shoe's uncomfortable, do it afterwards.
Yeah.
Like
Just ignore it.
Don't stop and sit down and have something to eat.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it, because you've only got to do this for another 40 seconds.
Yeah.
I guess that's also where experience comes in, because, you know, we tend to sort of run the same distances a few times. So I guess you can kind of, you know, after a race, you can write down the things that you were thinking, because that's the other thing. Sometimes it's hard. Like when your marathon was 3 months ago, I mean, I don't always remember what I was thinking at kilometer 35. I just know that, you know, I bonked around then, but like, what was I thinking? I don't really remember. So yeah, sometimes writing them down after your race, I guess, could be helpful, because I think we tend to think the same kind of things, you know, for certain race distances.
Yeah, but you only remember them when you get to that distance, don't you? Like, oh, I remember this.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, there's two things. If you feel that your thoughts and feelings are kind of taking control over your behaviors, that's a danger sign. You're not imposing yourself, your will somewhere in that process. It's just like, I feel awful, I'm going to slow down, and you've slowed down before you even assessed whether that was a good thing to do or not.
Yeah.
So that's a sign where you should do a post hoc analysis.
Yep.
And then there's just the experience of, well, I screwed that up. That went really badly. And say, okay, why did it go badly? And what am I going to do in the future so it doesn't go badly like that? I had a sign 5 kilometers earlier. I had a sign that this was coming on, and I didn't do anything. I didn't take my gel, or in a marathon, that would be that. Or I just really didn't feel like I could swallow the gel, so I didn't take it. This is how Liz and I's marathons work. We have this nutrition strategy that looks great and is enacted superbly, and then it's not, and then it's totally ignored towards the end. Where you go, I cannot eat it. But if you don't eat it, you're going to have a problem just in the last few Ks, and lo and behold, you do, and you didn't eat it, and duh.
And that's where like a 20-mile race can be really good, because you can basically do exactly the same nutrition and
practice.
See if it works for the 20 miles. And if you can't cope with that nutrition for the 20 miles, then you're pretty unlikely to be okay with that for the marathon. So you can tweak it and try something else. And equally, if it worked really well for 20 miles, then it's pretty much going to work for the marathon. So, but you have to try something that it doesn't. There's quite possibly something that goes wrong first.
Part of the fun of marathons is things go wrong. I guess that's probably part of the appeal of ultras. You know, and even when you're the best prepared possible, something's going to happen. You don't know why or what, and part of the fun is it fun in inverted commas is working is working that out and trying to reanalyze, you know, how you're going to deal with it in the future.
Let's switch topics a little bit, because I really want to talk about altitude training, even though I've never gone to altitude, but I'm really curious. So because of the story at the beginning, my friend Mel, when she went to altitude for the first time, she didn't really do many like hard workouts, like the workouts that you typically do, let's say at home. So is going to altitude for the first time different than the subsequent times? Like, does it need to be treated differently?
I think psychologically it needs to be treated differently, because I think the first time you go to altitude, especially if you don't respond well, it can be really psychologically strange. You're like, normally I can run these paces and it's feeling really hard. And if you're not used to that feeling, and it's easy to panic when you get a bit higher up and you can't take the deep breaths that you want to. And so I think psychologically it's probably most different the first time. Physiologically, how we respond to altitude varies. Every time we go to altitude, we might have a different response. So whereas there are people who can naturally adapt quickly to altitude, and some people who find it more difficult. Even people who are fine with altitude can go back the next time and struggle. So
Oh, wow.
it's not a given that everyone adapts every time, and it can be for multiple reasons, including what I talked about before with iron. The amount of iron in your body. If you're iron deficient, it's very, very hard to adapt effectively to altitude. So all sorts of reasons, but certainly psychologically, the first time you go to altitude, it is a strange experience. Even I haven't been to particularly high altitude, but even just training in the Alps, as you get higher, that you just feel like you're suffocating slightly, and then you panic a bit and you're like, this is horrible, but you just get used to it and you adapt. And then the next time you go, you're expecting that. So it depends.
Alan, you look like did you have a question? Because otherwise, I'm going to ask Sim all about gear, because I know he's itching to talk about gear.
Always.
Let's talk about gear. Let's
Mhm.
talk about sustainability around gear, maybe. Go, Liz. What do
Okay.
you want to buy now?
Okay. Well, actually, at the moment, nothing. No.
Okay.
But we are always like surrounded by, just, we're kind of lucky in that right now there are just so many brands creating so many useful things. For example, like just the hydration packs. It used to be that like if you wanted a hydration pack, like you would buy Solomon, and it was hard to find, at least in Montreal it was. And you'd have to drive to some little running shop that was like an hour away to find some hydration vests, because the local shops didn't have them because they focused more on, just road running, and it was a bit of a niche product. Now, I mean, you have so many brands, they're everywhere. You can get less expensive ones, more expensive ones. So we're in a time where you can get so many things for running. And I guess in the book you do say like we need to ask ourselves if we really need a piece of gear or not. And because there are quite a few runners that maybe haven't been running for a long time, what do you think are sort of the non-negotiables? Let's say a road runner that's going to run, because I know you guys have an ultra background and it might be like quite a bit different for ultra. So let's start with road running. A road runner, what do you think is kind of absolutely essential, and then maybe like nice to have?
Shoes.
Perfect. Okay, that's the
Good
answer that I
start.
thought you were going to say.
Yeah. But I mean, like, if you've really never run before, like, hopefully you've got some sort of sporty shoes of some type. Like, they don't have to be specifically running shoes, and you can go out for your first run in that, because you're not like, if you're really at that point in your running, you're not going to be running very far. You're not necessarily going to be running very fast or anything. So you just want to get out and
Mhm.
start to sort of love it, and then you'll start to work out as you progress. You'll start to work out what type of running you like, and that's sort of the point where you start to get a bit more specific with your kit, and also where it makes a lot more difference what type of kit you've got. So, like, if you went into a running shop and bought a super light pair of racing shoes as your first pair of shoes, and then as you progressed, you found out you really like running 50K on road, then you're probably going to have to buy another pair of shoes. Whereas if you just left it a little bit, you can buy the right pair of shoes for what you've found that you like running. And also, it depends where you live. Like, the local trails or the local roads are going to be, and your local running club or people you run with Like it's going to be like it's best to buy the stuff which works for you the best.
Yeah, I guess I could probably speak for Liz on this as well. I probably have eight pairs of shoes that are currently active in my running.
Yeah.
And four other pairs that are not active, but I can't bear to throw them away. Don't tell my wife that. Have I been conned by? Have I been sort of manipulated by marketing ploys, or am I being a sophisticated runner?
Possibly both. Um, I'm quite geeky about all the kit and stuff, and I quite like keeping a bit of a record of how long all my different pairs of shoes last and how many runs I've done in them and the distance that I've done in them. And I definitely feel like it's hard to have real evidence, but I definitely feel like if you've got like maybe 2 or 3 pairs, maybe not necessarily 8 pairs, but if you've got a few pairs sort of that you run in regularly, it's sort of better for you and better for the shoes, because the shoes have longer to sort of rebound and between runs, and if they get wet, they're more likely to be dried, and if they get muddy, you're more likely to clean them because you're not necessarily going to run in them again the same day or the next day. So in which case you might think, oh, I'm not going to bother cleaning them today because I'm just going out tomorrow in them. And all of those things help the shoes last longer. And also it's going to mean that every time your foot hits the ground, if you're running in 2 or 3 different pairs of shoes every week, then it's going to be very slightly different for your foot every time, which feels like it reduces sort of injury likelihood. And it also probably means that like you've got a pair of sort of comfortable road shoes that you can run a long way in. You've got a pair of lightweight road shoes if you want to do a 5K and you really care about your time. They'll probably help a little tiny bit. You've got a pair of like trail running shoes. Maybe you've got a pair of shoes which are good if it's really muddy. Like there is sort of justification for a few pairs of shoes if you run a lot.
And you've got a blue pair that matches your blue
top.
Yes.
You've got a green pair that matches your green top.
Yeah,
and so
I think that's less important.
So for the shoes, I like that you mentioned that you don't need to necessarily have a pair of shoes before you start running. Because I think a lot of times, because I have like coworkers and stuff that sometimes have said things like, oh yeah, I'd like to start running. Oh, but I don't have a pair of shoes. And so I like that you just remove that whole barrier, because like you actually don't need, you could just wear something athletic, which most people have, because most people have like gone to the gym or something
they've got
like
gym
that.
shoes or tennis shoes. Or
Yeah. So they could just start with that. What about a sports bra for women? Would that also be like, is that something that you should actually have before you start running, or can you skip out on that as well until later?
Can't skip out on that one. You can't just wear your normal bra.
I tend to agree with that.
I would say, like, even as someone pretty small in the chest department, I wouldn't want to run very far at all without a good sports bra. So, and it is, I mean, that I was thinking about, if you're a new runner going into a running shoe shop is quite intimidating and all that choice and stuff. And it's probably similar with sports bras, really. But I think going and getting one fitted, making sure it's the right size is going to be really important, and make things much more comfortable. And it's much better for breast health and things as well. So I'd say that's a non-negotiable.
And that's really important for kids as well. So like as parents of kids who are athletic and run, it's not necessarily something they know about. And so it's really important to make sure they do know about it and help.
Yeah, our daughter's nearly 13 and it's something, we're going through with her now. And I remember when I was her age running a lot and not having a sports bra, and it was really uncomfortable. So yeah, I think really important part of kit.
And also that like you change, say the sports bra that you had when you first started running it's not necessarily going to be the best one still at a later point in your running career.
Yeah, they've definitely evolved. Like now, you can get them very fitted with, cup sizes and everything. I mean, I remember even just like 10 years ago, I mean, it was basically, small, medium, large, extra large, and you just got one that like was tight, but that you could squeeze into so that, everything was kind of squeezed in and didn't move. That was basically the strategy, is just don't get it too big. It'll be fine. Now there's cup sizes and brands have adjustable straps and all these kinds of things, which
And do people in running shops give you advice on that? I've never had the experience.
no, well, so it depends, but like a lot of running shops have like male people like working there, and they can
Yeah.
give you really great advice on shoes, but I have to say that they are um quite embarrassed if you ask them about sports bras. It's kind of like, well, here's the section. So yeah, you kind of have to go yeah, I know that I tried to buy a Brooks sports bra, and I'm kind of small chested. So I have the problem where a lot of the things that have cup sizes, the cup sizes are just like they don't fit properly. They kind of like have this strange way of gaping, and they don't fit like I think my chest circumference is like too big for my breast size, which is kind of strange to hear. Sorry, Alan, lots of detail, but we are
All
running
good.
buddies. And so what I end up finding is that the things that have cups, like normal bras, I don't even wear them anymore because I find that the cups, they sit too close together, like whereas like there should be more gap in between. And so they kind of gape in strange places. So I tend not to buy those ones, but I wanted to buy this Brooks sports bra because it had like pockets on it. And I thought that was great because you could put a key in there because women's sports clothing tends not to have pockets. And you have to carry something. I mean, you always have like a house key or a car key or something to carry. And so these sports bras, I mean, I spent like an hour looking through their website and trying to measure like the different things that they had to measure. And I settled on a size, and it's like I guess it turned out okay. Um, but yeah, it wasn't like an easy thing to navigate. So I don't know. Any tricks for us, Jen, about getting help with sports bras?
I have the same issues. It's not a problem, but the same issues as you do with that, and I end up with just the kind of crop top style ones that squash everything down and
Exactly. I find those are like so easy. Yeah,
yeah,
you just get the right size. Can't be too. Has to
yeah,
be not loose at the bottom because otherwise you get chafing under
yeah.
where
That's
the strap
horrendous.
is. Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah, but I
Alan, you
do
wouldn't
think
know
like
anything about that, but
I do think it's an area that it's still not there, is it? Like the whole
it's
process.
much better. But yeah,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
the
And
figuring it out. I think the options are there because
yeah,
there's so many now. But
yeah. There's a whole like in Portsmouth in the UK, there's a whole lab dedicated to breast biomechanics. And
wow.
and it's fascinating. I went to a conference and they were presenting and they put markers on runners' breasts and like they do this amazing like figure of eight movement.
How they move. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, and everyone was just sitting there hypnotized by this.
That is fascinating.
It is, and everyone thought they just went up and down, but actually they do this figure of eight movement. So that then led on to developing bras that support that movement because obviously you don't want it, especially if you've got bigger breasts, you don't want to just clamp them down. You want to work with the movement and stuff. So there has been loads of really good research done, and things are definitely a lot better than the first bra that was made of two jock straps.
Yes. I like that story. That would
Yeah.
it just shows how far we've come. But I feel like a lot of the advancements are like in the last decade.
Yeah,
The shops let you
definitely.
try them on and run around in them to see if because it's a bit like shoes, huh? If you put your shoes on and you stand in them, you go, okay, well, they feel all right. But then they go, hey, go, run. When you're in the store, they always go, run up and down, run around this little track we've made in the store.
Not quite as straightforward, is it?
No.
No. I imagine that you could just like come out of the changing room and run around in your new sports bra,
You
but
probably should because you need
I
to
think
check if your
most
figure eight
women
movement
don't.
is being controlled properly.
Yeah.
They're quite expensive as well, aren't they? So,
They are. Yeah, they are. Yeah, I mean, you won't like and they've gotten more expensive recently, I guess, with all the new materials and all those things. But yeah, now, I mean, it's hard to get under $60 Canadian for a sports
Yeah.
bra that is, a little more sophisticated. I mean, I guess you could get the little crop top style Nike ones, maybe at the one of those like discount stores. You could probably get that for about $30, but yeah, if you're looking for
Yeah.
anything, yeah. And
You
some of them
realize,
go as high as like $100. I mean, I see some of the Lululemon brand ones, and
Yeah.
I just I just can't. I can't imagine. The
you
price is so
realize
high. I mean,
we've just lost 50% of our demographic now because
We
we're
might have
about
gained more.
we're about
yeah, maybe.
50-50. Or maybe the guys are all
Maybe
fascinated. I don't know. Yeah.
the
Well, we
chaps in
did
running
say
shops
jock
need to be
strap,
listening.
so.
Yeah.
Okay, Alan, bring him
Yeah.
back.
Yeah, I have what I refer to as my sports bra, which is two band-aids, one across each nipple to stop nipple chafing, basically. Which works really well, guys, if you don't use that
Alan, you should
approach.
talk about the positioning. You have to put them up and down, not sideways,
Yeah.
because sideways the shirt rubs and it rubs them off. Right, Alan? You
God,
told
you're
me
a
this.
sophisticated you listen to my stupid stories. Um, one of the things in terms of just moving away from gear but staying with feet, one of the things I see when I watch videos of ultra runners in particular is, they're very fastidious about their foot care because obviously if you're going for a lot of hours, a small problem can become a big problem with your foot, and then it can make life very difficult for you. But often they'll take their socks off, they'll dry their feet or wash their feet, and then they'll smear their feet completely in stuff, some sort of cream or ointment or something. And I go, oh my God, that must be awful. Usually what I'm trying to do is keep my feet dry and keep them in merino socks, but it seems to be a legitimate practice to smear your complete foot in something. What's going on there?
I think it could be one of two things. If you're running an ultra where your feet are going to be wet a lot of the time, that water just being wet for hours and hours and hours macerates your skin and you get cracks and it's really, really, really painful and you get nerve damage and all sorts of horrible stuff. So you can use a barrier cream, which is basically like a nappy cream that you use for babies.
Okay.
And a diaper cream probably.
Yeah.
So that just waterproofs the skin and stops the water being able to get into the skin. So it could be that, or it could be like a lubricant like Vaseline or something like that, just to reduce friction and stop blisters. That's probably one of those two things. Or you can put one on, so you put the barrier cream on and then put the lubricant over the top, which is a
Okay.
good tip for long wet ultras, I think.
I would figure that if you put Vaseline all over your feet, that's going to capture the natural moisture of your foot inside the Vaseline and probably cause you problems, but I have no idea. I've never done it.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to, does it?
Yeah.
It just seems to reduce friction. And certainly with Vaseline, I tend to just put it on the spots that I know rub, like my heels and my big toes.
Okay.
So I tend to be a bit more specific with that one. But
And you did also mention that for the barrier cream, it's useful to start putting it on before race day, because
yeah,
it works better. Yeah, that was really interesting.
You did properly read the book, didn't you?
Sounds like I did.
Yeah. We do pride ourselves on reading all the books from cover to cover.
Yeah. Yeah. This book, I mean, it had so much. It had so much in it, and I mean, we could probably talk for like 4 hours, but I know that, you don't have 4 hours. You have other things to do. So people are interested in getting a copy. Where do you want to direct them?
Amazon's easy. It's on Amazon. Or direct from a publisher, which is adventurebooks.co.uk. I think it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, Amazon it's on 35% off at the moment. So in the UK anyway. So
So that'd be the time to get that book then.
Yep.
And so you
Yeah,
guys have a
the
lot
North
going on.
American publisher is Vertebrate Publishing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that's the
the
same.
UK one as well. Yeah.
So where can listeners see what you're up to?
Our website is jenandsimbenson.co.uk. And Instagram is at jenandsim, as is Twitter, but we're mainly on Instagram.
That sounds good. Yeah. We're on Twitter, but we're not very good at Twitter.
I'm
Twittering.
not very good at most things. Are you taking people who want coaching at this point? Do you do
We do
just
have some
distance
spaces
online?
available at the moment. Yeah.
So if you want to get coached by people who know it all, you can check that they know it all by getting a copy of this book, Smart Running, before you contact them to get coached in all aspects.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We've had quite a lot of feedback from other coaches actually who've said it's a really useful book. So
Oh, that's good.
Oh,
There
fantastic.
you go.
Yes. Yeah.
Liz is coaching, so she'll just add it to her our armory of
Yeah.
books.
Yeah, well, it's useful. It's useful to just like read lots as a coach and sort of keep an eye on the internet and things,
Yeah.
and because things change and studies come out. But it's also just great to get ideas from other people.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I particularly liked what you guys would say about the tech and the devices, because I find that like a lot of experienced runners, because they've had the experience of their tech not really telling them the good data, they kind of understand that, like, it's fun, but like don't take it too seriously. But I feel like a runner that's maybe a bit newer, like been running for a couple of years and maybe followed a few plans like online and stuff, they tend to be very attentive to what their watches are saying, and they'll often send me a message being like, oh, my watch it's 2 days before the race and it's telling me that I'm like overreaching or something like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, so it's really
My
interesting.
watch says I'm unproductive. What kind of coach are you?
Yeah, or I mean, the one thing that's that just happened recently is someone sent me a message saying, my watch is telling me that my VO2 max decreased. I don't understand because I'm feeling so good these days. And I'm like, yeah, it's just ignore that. Feeling good is what counts.
Yeah.
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 It's kind of interesting because RPE is a super, relative perceived effort is a super underutilized thing.
Yeah.
But you've almost can't do it when you're just beginning because you don't know what you're supposed to feel.
Yeah.
So
It's very hard to sell as well.
yeah,
It is. Yeah,
spend a
it
lot of
is.
time talking to people about, well, how did you feel? Well, I
Yeah.
felt tired, but how tired? Could you talk while you were running? And
Yeah.
people, yeah.
You feel
I
like you
think
could
that's
push
when,
harder. Yeah.
I think that's when the breathing test's quite good as well. Like, could you speak in full sentences, or
Yeah.
could you speak in just single swear words? Or like, how hard are you working?
Short,
So,
sharp swear words. Yeah.
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 Single swear words means that you're probably at like 8, 9.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
not having fun.
Not having fun. Yeah.
Should we give our little summaries?
Yes.
So, Smart Running by Jen and Sim Benson. The ultimate guide to becoming a fitter, stronger, more confident runner. There you go. Who doesn't want to do that? The book's quite dense and well presented. It has sort of highlight sections and green boxes, which enables you to navigate around and find the bit that you're kind of interested in. The little summary sections, it's super well laid out from that point of view. It's easy to just dip in and get a little piece of knowledge that's kind of presented straight to you visually. So that's excellent. It does a great job of covering the fundamentals. So it goes right across almost anything you could think of in terms of giving you the information that you might be interested in, but it also adds detail and expertise. So if you want to deep dive or you want to get a reference and go off and check that out, I came across, I mean, we're over 100 books reviewed now, and I came across some things I'd never seen before. So it does great in terms of diving in as well. It covers the theory, so the generally accepted wisdoms and the references, but also adds experience and practice, because these two folks have been there and done that. They've done coaching, they have the experience, but they've actually done the runs and they have the experience as well. So they can talk about that, and they do talk about their own personal experiences. There's some great exercises and training tables near the back to give you some know-how of things that are practical and easy to do. And there's such a lot of stuff in the book that probably this podcast has only scratched the surface.
I guess I'll echo the way that the content is laid out, because those little green boxes, I also find that it's helpful if you want to reread a section and you're like, oh, I remember seeing something about that in somewhere in the book, and you can kind of flip back through the section you thought it was in, and you can read those little highlighted green boxes. I particularly like the mental skills chapter because it was short with only a few easy tools that we can try. I think that makes it easier to get started before moving on to like more tools from other books that are dedicated solely to that topic. So I really like that section. I thought that was really well done. The book is a soft cover, but the quality is really nice. So it's a cover that's like thick and will withstand years of referencing, and the pages are like a heavy paperweight. So, you can highlight and put little sticky notes, and yeah, you could do all that stuff. I think it'll be good for years to come, years of referencing. In terms of who's this good for, I think it's for any runner who kind of wants to know more. So you've been doing this running thing, you caught the running bug, and now you're just like, well, I think I'm ready to learn more about it.
Good stuff.
Yeah,
So,
great book.
Thanks for the book, Jen and Sim.
Glad you
When's
enjoyed
the next book coming out?
I've got one coming out in September about ultra running, about women in
really?
ultra running. Yeah.
Oh,
fantastic.
wow.
It's a bit different. It's a bit more of a history and narrative and autobiographical mixture. Lots of
That could
interviews.
be fun.
Yeah. So
Keep in touch.
yeah, we'll
Mhm.
send you one.
We'll
That's
get you on again.
amazing. I thought you were gonna say like you're never writing
Yeah,
again,
so did
because
I.
this book was
Yeah.
was
I was
so
just throwing it out there so you could say, "Oh God, we're still recovering. We're still in remission."
Yeah, I think this is our 12th or 13th book.
Okay, so you
Yeah. I was on your website and I noticed there were quite a
Yeah.
few books, but I
Yeah.
didn't look
This
at the
one is-
timeline. Yeah.
Yeah, this one's been hardest to write, I think, though.
Yeah, yeah, we've done quite a few sort of guidebook things before, but yeah,
Okay.
we've done a few more how-to this sort of have come out recently, which has been quite differently hard to write, but fun.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's great. We'll look out for that, and we certainly wish you every success with this book. I'm sure it'll
Thank
do
you.
well, and thanks for spending so much time with us.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Running Book Reviews. Big thank you to the publisher Vertebrate for providing review copies of the book, and a huge thank you to Jen and Sim for spending time with us today. If you'd like to leave us some feedback about how we can improve the podcast, or you want to suggest a book that you'd like us to review in a future episode, please do not hesitate. Leave us a comment on social media. We love seeing your comments. We are Running Book Reviews on Facebook and Instagram, and on Twitter we are reviews_running. I guess when I say Twitter I should say X, but does anybody use X? Please also follow us on social media to find out about new episodes when they're released, or you can just subscribe to the podcast on your favorite streaming platform. If you've been listening for a while and are wondering how you can help us out, there are a few ways. If you're enjoying the podcast, spread the word. And of course, you're enjoying the podcast. What are you doing here at the end of the podcast if you haven't enjoyed it? So spread the word, tell your friends about us, share a link to your favorite episode with a running partner. You can also leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. That helps the podcast a lot if we build up the reviews. So if you listen on Apple, you can leave us a review, or if you're on Spotify, you can rate us out of 5 stars. We're also on a platform called Buy Me a Coffee. You can go there, look on Buy Me a Coffee for the Creator Running Book reviews, and you can see various outtakes, photographs, snippets, thoughts, musings on there. That's kind of a blog that we have. You can also buy us a coffee if you want to make a donation on that site, but you don't have to. It's all there up for grabs, free of charge. That's all for today from Running Book Reviews. Bye for now.
Bye.